They were horribly influential, I have to say. It's like you can't really appreciate how influential until you see how many people migrated through their programs. And they didn't migrate through as a mandatory thing, like, it wasn't like, well, if you don't go to this, you're fired sort of thing. No, they went to it to network. They went to it to find out the latest ideas on management of a company and so on. And humanistic studies is very much a religious proposition. So, to say that all these corporate engineers and so on are corporate mucky mucks are humanists probably would be an understatement. To call them religious, they would argue that. And, well, no, I'm not religious at all. But, the Supreme Court even declared that humanism was a religion. So I won't argue with it. It has all the earmarks of it.
Are you familiar with the Reese Committee, where they studied the effect of nonprofit foundations and their influence on America?
Right. Yeah, it's huge. The influence was just huge. If it were not for these large bodies of independent slush fund money, we wouldn't be where we are today. That's just flat out true. Whether it's today in the more modern context, whether it's a Bill Gates or some of the other big billionaires of the world, or whether it's old money like from the Rockefeller family or some of the banking institutions of the world. When they got the ability to set up the NGOs and these independent think tanks and trust funds and so on, and started pumping money into it, it has really been the engine of social change for the last 100 years, very much so. They've had their fingerprints on everything.
It's like if they had 10 fingers and 10 toes in the pie. That's not enough. You can't even describe their activities with that. So you've got these foundations, you've got their influence in the university system, you got their influence in grade school and how school comes about, you got their influence over how businesses are being run. They help to create the United Nations, and then they go and create Bretton Woods, the IMF, and World Bank. And this is also running parallel to this idea of technocracy, which they haven't brought back to the surface yet. It's like a submarine. I think I read that someplace. It's like a submarine, and it wasn't visible at that point. But those things were being developed, and then Brzezinski kind of rose and brought it together. How would you describe it in your words?
Well, I think that's the way it did. in Nazi Germany, especially when Hitler nixed the technocracy organization, they just went, dive, and they went under the water, and they were still there the whole time.
I think there was more than one submarine. Eugenics went under and came up molecular biology. It was like, they just take this little side route, and then we lose their trail. I think at one point it's Agenda 21. No one hears of Agenda 21 because you gave about 10 synonyms for it. How else is Agenda 21 known today as far as what are the synonyms?
Yeah, you've got a number of things that spring from it, and I suppose my identification of technocracy has a lot to do with that. Because you have to look at the bigger picture and how we got here to understand what really is a part and what isn't a part. But the original technocracy documents from the 30s had provisions for what they call functional sequences in governance, not government, governance, the management of society. A functional sequence was some common area in society that needs to be managed by a central authority. Healthcare would be a good example of a functional sequence. Manufacturing would be a functional sequence. Education, they call it a service sequence because it wasn't making anything. It was a service provided. But they specified all this stuff originally in the technocracy study course. And education, for instance, is a fundamental part of technocracy. They called it a system of continental conditioning. That was their view of education. Well, I thought education was about learning things and learning how to think critically and reason things out. I said, no, that may be true for you and I, but it wasn't for them. For them, it was just a matter of conditioning. And I'm sure when they wrote that, they were they had Pavlov in mind with his conditioning the animals to drool when they ring a bell. That's really all education to them really was important for. And that's what we see in Common Core today. It's the same kind of thing. It's a system of human conditioning. It's not a system of education. You have smart grid, the idea of putting these meters and stuff on people's and businesses to control the energy that is consumed within those facilities. This is an original specification of technocracy from the 1930s. You have the massive surveillance that's going on today with a total awareness society. This was an original specification from technocracy in the 1930s. You cannot manage what you cannot monitor. That's an engineer's mindset. People need to think like engineers. You can't manage what you cannot monitor, can't control it. So you have to manage it. Well, what do you need to monitor? Well, I need data. That's what they'll say. Oh, we have to have data. Well, what kind of data do you need? Well, I need everything. How much data is enough? No, there's no such thing. There's never enough data. You always need more data. So what do you need? What kind of data do you need? Well, we need, if it's an economic system we're managing, we need to have all the financial records. We need to know what's in people's minds psychologically, what they want to buy, what they want to do with their lives. We need to have all their health records because, that's important to manage the health of the society. They need all the education records, like Common Core collects 400 data points on students now, becomes a permanent part of their record forever. It'll follow them until they die. And, you have public-private partnerships, which has flavors of fascism in it, but it's not quite, but it's flavors of it. All of these things come from the same source. They were all specified and talked about in the Agenda 21 document that was produced by the Rio Conference. What people just don't get, and they're shocked to find out, is that the United Nations itself says that the Rio Conference was preceded by the Brundtland Commission, which is widely credited by the UN itself as being the foundation stone for the Rio Conference to take place. They point back to the Brundtland Commission. The Brundtland Commission convened in 1982 and it ended in 1987 with the production of a book called Our Common Future. That was the book that staked the claim of sustainable development. They popularized the term. It had been mentioned before, but they were the ones that really brought it to society's lips. And Our Common Future became the book that fueled virtually 100% of the policies that made their way into the Agenda 21 book. What the Rio Conference did was merely to bring together whatever it was, 190 nations from around the world to talk about it and ratify it. It was kind of a giant consensus meeting.
Fascinating. More Agenda 21. That's interesting. I think we were talking... That is coming up. So we're going to continue with this segment if we have time through the show today. That is the Technocracy. We are interviewing Patrick Wood, who wrote a book called Technocracy Rising, talking about how technology is taking over the society. And we're going to continue with that segment coming up as we continue here on Way Out There on GJRB Online. Here on Spreaker across America, let's take a look at our weather on the fives right now. I'll take a look at Tucson, Arizona. And let's take a look at our weather on the fives. Take a look at the weather in Houston, Texas, and some of those areas. Houston, Texas, right now, under that remnants of Imelda, which is going to give a lot of flash flooding in that area. Imelda giving the weather situation a little switch of a change there in that. And we're going to take a look at that right now, real quickly, like weather on the fives here on GJRB Online. And let's take a look at that temperatures for Houston, Texas right now, then the conditions for Houston, as soon as I can get that in. Houston, Texas right now, checking in with 80 degrees right now. 82 from the Brown downtown Houston station there, 82 degrees, and your relative humidity is at 70%, 2.74, barometric pressure 29.99 inches of mercury. You have a high, very high UV index at 9, but your air quality is good. 20% chance of showers, clouds going out, stray shower, thunderstorm possible for Houston, Texas. Low 77 degrees. Mostly cloudy skies. Stray shower and thunderstorms possible for Houston, Texas tomorrow. The high of 88 degrees. East-southeast winds 10 to 15 miles per hour. And a few clouds, and from time to time there will be 77 degrees. East-southeast winds at about 5 to 10 miles per hour. Once again, Houston, Texas currently now checking in. And you got 27 degrees. Let's get back. We're going to get back down to more of the Way Out There show right here on GJRB Online. You're enjoying the encore presentation of Way Out There here on GJRB Online right here on Spreaker. We'll have another weather on the fives. Weather on the fives, 25 and 45 minutes past the hour on all music shows, 25 and 55 on all talk shows, right here on GJRB Online here on Spreaker. Gary J. Russell with you. Thanks a lot for tuning in. Hope you're enjoying the program wherever you're listening across this USA as we bring you Way Out There. The strange, the bizarre, the unusual. Coming up in our next segment, got some interesting stuff for you. We're going to continue with that strange but true, and got some. We got Calvin coming up with Slap Ham. Some more weird stuff coming up, so stay with me for that. Also coming up in this next segment, we're going to feature. I have a few other interesting stories for you. We're going to do our open line segment, and we're going to talk about more strange stuff. So stay with me. Way Out There continues on GJRB after the break on the GJRB Online Network. Stay tuned. Be right back.